Hello. Today we're going to be making homemade Larabars, and the reason I was inspired to do this is because Larabars are really expensive. However, they're a very delicious and nutritious snack, and I love when we have them on hand. So I did a little research online and found a couple of flavors that I really thought we would enjoy having around the home. And today I'm going to be making the Dark Chocolate Brownie Larabars and the Gingerbread Larabars. In front of me I have the ingredients set up for the Dark Chocolate Larabars because I want to lead on the strongest flavor and the flavor I'm personally most excited about. So the first step for this recipe is to soak a cup of dates in a cup of warm water. And the purpose of this is to soften the dates up so that they'll process easier in the food processor. And the way I got the water to the temperature I needed it to be was I heated it up in the microwave at 30-second intervals. And for me personally, based on the strength of my microwave, I only needed to do 2 full 30-second intervals and 1 15-second interval. So now that it's soaked for the 10 minutes, I'm going to go ahead and lay the dates out on paper towels to get them dry and ready to process. Now in front of me I also have cocoa powder, unsweetened, some kosher salt, and the recipe did recommend using sea salt, but I don't have any of that on hand, and I'm not spending the money on that or worrying about it. The recipe also gave the option to totally omit the sea salt, but I thought that would give it a nice little kick, so I am going to be adding some of that. This particular recipe also calls for a half cup raw walnuts, a half cup raw almonds, and 3 tablespoons of chocolate. Now I'm using Baker's chocolate that I had sitting around in my freezer for a while. Don't worry, it was still good. I have been meaning to get it out of the freezer for a while, so I'm very happy that this recipe has given me the opportunity to do that. And the amount of chocolate that it called for was about 3 tablespoons, so I ended up being lucky in having the equivalent of that. I'm just going to move this dirty date water to the side. The recipe explicitly states that you don't need that and should discard that. So after the dates are done and while they're drying, I'm going to process the almonds and the walnuts in the food processor, and we want them to be finely chopped, but not quite to the consistency of an almond butter or a peanut butter or anything like that. Nuts is another thing we always have on hand, really good to snack on, really filling, really indulgent almost. So definitely enjoy having nuts on hand and eating anything with a high quantity of nuts in it. And I think that's generally one of the reasons that the Larabars are so satisfying, is because they're basically just fruit and nuts and some other sweet elements. So they definitely do a good job of tricking me into thinking I'm eating a dessert, while in reality I'm eating more of a fruit. So please excuse the noise. I'm going to go ahead and get these processed, and then I'll be back to chat. Look at this. I see some larger pieces, but I also see some small pieces on the bottom, so I just want to give it a little shake to make sure that everything is getting even attention by the blade of the food processor. And even though the recipe doesn't give explicit instructions on how small to make the nuts, just kind of think, if you were eating a bar, would you want giant chunks of almond in there? I mean, for me personally, I wouldn't mind a few giant chunks, but I definitely don't want a bunch throughout the bar. I think that's going to be about perfect. Yeah, like I see 1 or 2 big-ish pieces, but I don't know how well you can see that. This is kind of an odd camera angle. But that I'm comfortable with that. I could get a piece like that and be fine. So after the nuts are appropriately processed, I'm basically adding all of the other ingredients, including the dates, the cocoa powder, the salt, and the chocolate. So I'm going to go ahead and get that done. And I believe I mentioned this when I was discussing the dates, but the recipe mentions that if your dried fruit is a little softer, so I believe what they meant by that is if it's less dry, so if it has more moisture in it, you can actually skip the soaking step. These dates were, I would say, pretty moist. I just purchased them yesterday, but I didn't want to take any chances because I'm sort of inept at using food processors in the first place, so I wanted to set myself up for success. I'm just going to get all that chocolate sprinkled in there. Now this particular recipe also has a ton of other options for flavors. They have cherry pie and apple pie, of fruits more your style. They have some peanut butter flavors, which normally I would have gravitated towards because I'm addicted to peanut butter. But we've made a recipe like that in the past, and I was not super impressed. It was honestly a little boring, but this one might be better. That recipe is from a different source, so maybe if I really like these, I'm open to trying it. And yes, I did just wipe my hands on myself, but these are my cooking clothes, so I don't care if they get dirty. I'm going to sprinkle a little touch of salt in there. They just said 1/8 of a teaspoon. Get that put away. And then I believe it's 2 tablespoons of unsweetened cocoa powder. So I'm going to get that added in there. And then I believe that the goal was just to get it together, and when it begins to stick together and it kind of looks like the consistency of a Larabar, you're good to go. And luckily, these don't take forever to set up. Once you put them in the loaf pan, which I'll show you how I prepared that in a little bit. Once you put it in the loaf pan and in the fridge, it only takes half an hour, which is pretty quick. This morning I was actually worried that there was going to be a lot of soaking and this was going to be much more labor intensive. I think the amount of labor required really depends on how difficult the dates are to process. So I'm going to give it a whirl. The recipe specifically says it should take about 2 minutes, but our personal food processor, you can't just leave running for that long, so I'm just going to kind of look at the time, pulse it for a couple of minutes. Good, and the time just changed, so let's get her going. Okay, and I definitely think there's going to be a lot of trial and error with this, kind of scraping down the sides and making sure everything's mixed, but like I would eat that right now. I don't know if you can see that. It basically just looks like chocolate nut goo. I'm going to run over to the other side of my kitchen and get a spatula. So I'm just going to scrape the sides down because I find, especially with this food processor, really regardless of what I'm making, pardon me, it needs a little help. And I think it might be because of the shape. Most of the other food processors I've seen, there we go, are a little wider and are not quite as tall. So I think that might be why this one needs a little extra TLC when stuff is being made in it, but you know what? It's okay. Does anyone else with pets ever find their pet's hair like literally everywhere? Like, I'm pretty sure I just found a cat hair in there, but I picked it out, so we're good. All right. This has been scraped, and I'll just listen. My food processor kind of makes a sound when it's not going to do anything. And when I hear that sound, I'll go ahead and scrape it. And it actually tends to make that sound less, or rather it only makes that sound when the stuff in it is kind of very spread out from the blade. So what I'm doing is scraping down the sides and making sure that the stuff is there. But I think we're actually almost there, to be honest. I definitely wasn't processing for the full 2 minutes, but like if this was smushed together in a loaf pan and hung out for half an hour in the refrigerator, I think that this could be a Larabar. And honestly, this smells really good. I unfortunately didn't have the full amount of chocolate. Like they said, 3, what did they say? Let's check. I think they said 3, let's see, 3 tablespoons. So I had like maybe 2.5 tablespoons, but I figured we'd be okay. The one thing that's really surprising to me is that like none of these recipes require really any water, because I definitely feel like that would help bind everything together, but that's just like a personal opinion. You know, someone who makes smoothies, which I guess this is not a smoothie, but someone who makes smoothies, liquid is integral in binding everything together. I guess the dates for that. All right, I'm satisfied with that. The top isn't perfect, but the bottom is perfect, so. Oh, it's sticky. Well, it feels like a Larabar. So what I've heard on the interwebs is that if you're working with something sticky, you can wet your hands a little bit and it won't stick as bad to your hands, but I'm lazy and I'm not doing that. Plus, I don't really have to touch it, so I'm not too concerned about that. So here's my loaf pan. The recipe says a 9 by 5. This is probably a little smaller than that, but it'll do the trick. So the recipe says to line a loaf pan with either parchment paper or plastic wrap. I don't own parchment paper, so I used plastic wrap. It says if you're using plastic wrap, put some oil in there. And the key was to make sure that some is hanging off the sides. I don't know quite how successful my particular arrangement is going to be. I feel like it wasn't quite wide enough, but plastic wrap is something I have a very difficult time working with. But it'll be okay. Even if I hadn't used the plastic wrap, this particular loaf pan is super non-stick, so I don't think it would have stuck anyway. So I've taken the blade out of my food processor. Ooh. I dropped the lid. Okay, I'll pick that up afterwards because we don't want the pets getting to that. I think I should have used this side. Yeah, that's a little better, a little more direct. So again, didn't quite perfectly have an overhanging plastic side, which is going to help with getting it out, but I think it'll be just fine. So I think I'm actually going to transition to my hands. Wow, that feels nice. Oh, I think that's going to be really good. Okay. Yeah, I have a little more control with my hands. They're clean. I've just been here working. So if they have anything on them, it's all ingredients related to this dish. And yeah, there's a couple little walnut pieces that didn't get perfectly mixed. It's fine. It doesn't have to be perfect. But I do want to get all of this because when I make the gingerbread flavor, I want this smeared out as much as possible. Alright, so again, I'm just going to use my hands. I'm going to get it in an even layer. Wow, this like really looks like a Larabar. I'll show you when I'm done smashing it. But I'm pretty impressed because I know the last time we made this, which was maybe 3 years ago. Like, they were good, they just were, there was something, like, I don't want to say off about them, but they definitely did not have the appearance of a Larabar. So yeah, so I guess I do want to say there's something off about them, but not like bad off. They just, it was very obvious they were homemade. There was nothing un-homemade about that. I think one of the mistakes we probably made back then was we didn't quite pack it in, so I'm really trying to press down on it and get it packed in so that when it chills out in the fridge, we'll be able to cut it up and it'll stay in cohesive bars, because that was definitely an issue. Okay, so that feels pretty even to me. Gotta get with this camera angle. Okay, so now I'm gonna give my hands a quick rinse so I don't get oil all over the plastic wrap container, and then I'm gonna put plastic over this and get it in the fridge. Alright, so you guys get to watch me rip plastic wrap like a total amateur. Yay for that. Okay. It's also really hard when there's a bunch of stuff on the counter. Crock pot that's close to overflowing, you know, just normal. Okay. So, ooh, wait a minute. I might be too late for this. Okay, so this is covered. I'm going to get this in the fridge and set the timer for half an hour, and I will let everyone know how it is the next time I do a cooking video. I'll probably check back in later to at least show the gingerbread bars, if not give an entire explanation of how those are done. So I'm going to briefly go over the ingredients for the gingerbread Larabars. They're a lot less involved than the ingredients for the dark chocolate brownie Larabars, which is excellent because this is the last thing I have to do today. So it takes 1/4 cup of packed pitted soft whole dates soaked with a cup of water, and I'll get that done in a little bit. It takes 1/2 cup of pecans and almonds, so a little bit different nuts, no walnuts. And it also takes some really nice warm spices. It takes some cinnamon, some ginger, and some cloves. So after I've soaked my dates, I'm going to go ahead and get the nuts ground up just like last time. I'll get the dates dried, get the dates in there, and then I'll incorporate all of the spices and get that to the same consistency that I got the dark chocolate brownie Larabar. I'll let you guys know how both of these recipes were in the next video, and I'm really excited to try both of them, and I really appreciate you watching and spending this time with me. Thank you.